I wanna do. It's on now, payback. Do whatever I wanna do. It's on now, payback. Do whatever I wanna do. But now my heart is gone cold.
What's going on, world? It's your boy Dream Chaser. I am sitting here with the legendary Rae Lewis Thornton, who has been gracious enough as to allow me to come into her house and, you know, dig into her life a little bit. So if you all don't know anything about Rae Lewis Thornton, shame on you. I'm going to post her Twitter on this video, and I'll put a link to it as well. But I first met Rae last summer, I believe it was, at a tweet and greet that happened downtown in Chicago. So again, I've been waiting for this interview for a while. Rae is right now, as we speak, tweeting about the interview. So yeah, I hope you all enjoy.
Currently I am an AIDS activist. I'm the first black woman to tell my story on the cover of a major magazine. December 1994, I appeared on the cover of Essence. And there we told my story, and we gave black women a face for AIDS that they had never seen before. But not just that, we gave them a story that looked like their stories. Drug, alcohol, cigarette-free, never had a one-night stand, never had sex on the first date, only had sex with men I thought I loved. At least I thought I was loving them while I was loving them. Didn't know I wasn't going to love them forever, all of that good stuff. And so what we said to black women in this cover story was that you too could become HIV infected. And so you need to begin to cross your T's and dot your I's. And after that, of course, appearing on the cover of a national magazine, everything kind of, you know, does its own thing and takes on a life of its own. And for the past, 17 years, I've crisscrossed this country, telling my story, doing the work. God's given me a unique gift to be able to talk about my life in a way that it blesses the lives of others, enriches the lives of others. I have the pleasure of having an Emmy Award. I did a series of news reports, hard news reports on my life, where I sat anchor, told my story in an 8-part series. But the greatest accomplishment is doing this work and having women reach back to me and say, you changed my life in some way. It's amazing to me that women still bring me that Essence article in mint condition, and I got one issue and the eye is rubbed out, and it's like, are you kidding me? Do you still have it? And so it's heartwarming. It's heartwarming.
We are currently in it's 2011, and HIV and AIDS first came on the scene, I guess, in 1982 or 3. 81, okay.
81.
Taught me something.
For the 30th anniversary.
So before I was born, because I was born in 83.
Oh, wow.
So HIV is older than me. So how difficult was it, even in 94, after it had been around for a while, how difficult was it for you to make the decision to share your story with the world?
I kept my infection a secret for 7 years. I mean, my first 7 years, I told 5 people that I had HIV. And when I made a transition to AIDS, my whole world began to crumble. I went from a size 12 to a size 10 to a size 8 to a size 6 in 6 months. I went from 3 pills a day to 23 pills a day. I became clinically depressed. I started having menstrual cycles that were lasting 10, 15, and 21 days, because women with HIV have a lot of gynecological problems. So the burden of the disease was weighing down on me, not just the physical burden, but the secret of it. And so when I went public, it was just really originally to tell my friends and family that I was indeed infected. But then God had something else for me. Someone asked me on a fluke to speak at a school. I went, and it was remarkable. And I, 2 weeks later, quit my well-paying job as a political worker, because I was a political strategist prior, and started speaking. I had no idea at that point that it would take on a life of its own. Susan Taylor I had only been speaking for 6 months when Susan Taylor met me She only heard me speak for 3 minutes, and she grabbed my hand as I was walking away from the podium and asked me, could she do a story on me? And 2 weeks later, she called and asked, would I be on the cover? And I quite frankly said, Miss Taylor, there's not a black woman in America who would not want to be on the cover of your magazine, but you know nothing about me. Why would you put me on the cover of your magazine? She said to me, Rae, I believe you have a story to tell, and I want to tell it. I've always had this sense that my life is about ministry. It's about God using me to do something greater than myself. That, you know, it's a cliche, he took my mess and made it a ministry, but God really did. And being on the cover of Essence was that. And so I felt good about it at one level. And it was controversial too in the AIDS community, because the headline said, young, educated, and drug-free, but dying of AIDS. And other people were living with AIDS said, how dare you say you're dying from AIDS? We're living with AIDS. And that's what we were psyching ourselves up to believe back then, because treatment and care was not, antivirals were mediocre at best. And people were dying. AIDS was a death sentence back then. And so I was forcing people to deal with the truth of what this disease was. And then plus it was my story. And I was dying because I could look at myself in the mirror and see death staring back at me. It was scary, but it was what needed to be done. And that really didn't have anything to do with me. It had to do with how God was using my story and my life to help the lives of others. Magic is taking the medicine that is available to treat people with HIV. This medicine prolongs our life. It in fact does prolong the life of a person living with this disease if they cross their T's and dot their I's. The only real difference between Magic and I is the quality of life. He's a millionaire, and because he's a millionaire, he can have a chef and a cleaning person, and he didn't have to worry about bills and where he's going to get his next food from, his meal from, or if he's going to be able to afford his medication. So he is stress-free from those day-to-day life circumstances. But the fact of the matter is that the medicine that he takes is also available to all of us. We just don't have a pharmaceutical contract, like Magic. I mean, come on. If I'd say GlaxoSmithKline gave him a contract, then Abbott gave him a contract. I said, shit, at least I can talk. Right. Very well about HIV/AIDS.
Because Magic is very quiet these days.
He's very quiet, and he's not very articulate about this disease. He gets mumbled, jumbled, and people want real information. And so, in some ways, he's done us a little disservice, because he's been kind of hush-hush about treatment and care, and the only thing he's really told us are the medicines that he's taken that he's actually gotten pharmaceutical contracts for. And so I'm a little critical there. Okay. But I'm hating because I ain't no millionaire. But no, that he's done more disservice, because when you go into high schools, young people want to know, does Magic have a cure? Young people want to know, is Magic able to do something that my uncle can't do for himself with HIV? And I'm telling you, it's all the medicine. He has the same medicine that we have. He may have better access to the medication because he's a millionaire, and he may have a better quality of life because he's a millionaire. But there's nothing that Magic got that I can't get. Oh, there is absolutely stigma as it pertains to HIV/AIDS, and misinformation and miseducation and ignorance. I mean, just 4 years ago when I went to get this tattoo on my foot, and I just happened to tell the tattoo parlor owner in passing that I had HIV, and it wasn't the owner, it was the employee, and he looked me in the face and said, "We don't tattoo people with HIV." And the consent form said, "I agree that I do not have HIV." Of course, I, filed a lawsuit and brought him up on charges and won, because he had violated my rights to access to his facility, which is against the law. But sitting there in the hearing with him, I'm like, are you really a business owner? What people don't know, even on Twitter, I live on Twitter, and people ask questions that I thought we would know by now. Like 30 years into this AIDS epidemic, it's sad that there's so much that people do not know about this disease. And what's really disheartening is that there still is a lot of shame attached to this disease. There's a lot of stigma attached to this disease. I went to a funeral back in the summer, and only 4 people in the room knew the person had died from AIDS. Families aren't prepared to talk about it. I got an email from a woman in Florida last week. She's 42. She has AIDS, and her mom takes her to the clinic, but she refuses to come in with her. She stays out in the car. There's no one to talk to. She's isolated. I'm talking to a 17-year-old kid now who was just diagnosed, who's afraid to tell his mom because he's gay, and when he came out in his lifestyle, his mom said, "Oh, you're just gonna go home and you're just gonna bring AIDS back home." And so now that he's infected, he feels like he's fulfilled her prophecy, that somehow his sexuality is connected to his infection. And actually the reality was, the reason he's infected is because he trusted his partner. Point blank. But if he had trusted himself first, more than the partner, he'd be negative now. And so we have a long way to go, even in 2011. I don't joke about it. I don't let people joke with me about it. I stop them in their tracks. I don't let people give me misinformation and expect me to validate it. I call a spade a spade. We have got to create an environment that's conducive for people to go get tested, to know their HIV status, because the earlier you know your HIV status, the longer you live. We've got to create an environment where people can talk about their sexual behavior and sexuality without judgment, because when we don't, we create a whole lot of self-esteem. And low self-esteem creates drinking and alcohol, and a lot of poor decisions are rooted in low self-esteem. We've got to create an environment where people feel comfortable going into AIDS clinics. Even people who are diagnosed are afraid to go get treated because they don't want people to see them going into the clinic, into the AIDS clinic. And so the sad part here is there's a vicious cycle stuck in shame and stigma.
The broken, unspoken, the deeper down. Yeah, I love you. You know this, but I just can't love you now. Head in the clouds. I miss you. I just wanna say I remember the way you used to look me straight in the eye.